There are actors whose presence on screen, sometimes for only a few minutes, etches itself into our memory for a lifetime. Val Kilmer is one of those actors, from the icy stare of Iceman in Top Gun to the wild, burning intensity of Jim Morrison in The Doors, from the tragic, razor-sharp Doc Holliday of Tombstone to a Batman cloaked in his own kind of darkness. Val always made audiences feel that he wasn't simply acting. He was living inside every role. Yet behind all those layers of characters was a man full of contradictions, strong yet sensitive, proud yet wounded, famous yet quietly withdrawing into the shadows. What took Val Kilmer from the heights of 1990s stardom to years of almost complete disappearance from Hollywood? What truly happened behind the lights? And why was the greatest battle of his life the one that never took place on a movie set? This isn't just the story of a celebrated actor. It is a journey into the inner world of a man and the hidden corners where the spotlight could never reach. Val Edward Kilmer was born on December 31st, 1959, in Los Angeles, a city where glamour always walks side by side with invisible fractures. He grew up in what seemed like a complete family, but turmoil surfaced early. His parents divorced when Val was only 8, leaving a void no sound from any stage could ever fill. Even more devastating was the sudden death of his younger brother Wesley when Val was 17, a loss that haunted him for life, planting in him a deep fear of losing the things he loved most. From that moment on, Val became introspective, guarded, and far more sensitive than his strong exterior ever revealed. But those wounds also pushed him toward acting as a refuge. In school, he quickly stood out for his uncanny ability to inhabit a character, and at just 17, Val became the youngest person ever accepted into the prestigious acting program at the Juilliard School, a dream coveted by thousands of aspiring performers. At Juilliard, Val didn't just learn a craft. He learned how to transform pain into creative energy, how to turn the empty spaces within him into characters that felt vividly alive. It was where he realized he didn't merely want to act. He wanted to live on stage and in front of the camera as if those were the only places where he could truly be himself. And from those roots, a childhood marked by loss, a contemplative soul, and an intense sense of purpose, the figure of Val Kilmer stepped into the world of cinema, carrying with him things he would spend a lifetime trying to understand. After years of refinement at Juilliard, Val Kilmer stepped into the world armed with something different. He wasn't just a talented graduate, he was a young artist driven by the desire to live many different lives. That calling made Broadway his first stop, a place where Val learned to listen, to the audience and to himself. His first roles weren't blockbusters or spotlights. They were small parts, sometimes lasting only a few minutes. Yet Val performed them as if they were the last opportunities of his life. His intensity was so great that fellow actors often whispered that he was too intense for a small play. But to Val, every role was worth fighting for, because each one offered a way out of the real world, a world filled with his own private aches. In 1984, he stepped onto the big screen with Top Secret, a parody film that seemed unremarkable at first glance. Yet audiences noticed his mischievous eyes and surprising versatility. A year later, Real Genius allowed him to show he had character, depth, and remarkable range. But the true turning point came in 1986. When Val became Iceman in Top Gun, everything changed. He was no longer simply a promising young actor, he became an icon, cool, commanding, and powerful enough to stand opposite Tom Cruise and create a compelling counterweight. That role carried Val from the small stages of New York straight into Hollywood's stratosphere, a place where every gaze was fixed on him and every expectation pressed heavily on his shoulders. And at the very moment the spotlight first touched him, the fire inside Val flared brighter than ever. He could feel his life shifting into a new chapter, one he had long dreamed of, and yet, one he quietly feared. After Top Gun, Val Kilmer wasn't just famous. He became one of Hollywood's faces you couldn't ignore. But what made his rise extraordinary was that his fame didn't come from easy roles or familiar archetypes. Val always chose characters that demanded transformation, roles that forced him to dig down to the very core of human emotion. His first true peak came with The Doors, 1991. When he embodied Jim Morrison, Val didn't imitate him, he became him. He sang with his own voice, studied Morrison's movements, his speech, his smile, and even his silences. Audiences were left genuinely confused, unable to tell where the real Morrison ended and where Val Kilmer's performance began. It was then that Hollywood realized he wasn't just a star, he was a shapeshifter. Tombstone, 1993, elevated that truth even further. Val's Doc Holliday wasn't the typical gunslinger. He carried exhaustion, darkness, irony, and a deep, aching humanity. In every scene, Val portrayed a man caught between life and death, cold detachment and fierce loyalty. Many said his Doc Holliday wasn't a performance, it was a soul. Then came Batman Forever, 1995. Wearing the cape brought enormous pressure. The previous generation's Batman had set the bar high, and public expectations were even higher. But Val chose his own direction, portraying a Bruce Wayne defined by loneliness, torn between duty and unhealed wounds. He injected real emotional conflict into a superhero, something Hollywood wouldn't fully embrace until years later. All these roles formed a very distinct machinery of stardom: talent plus self-sacrifice plus the ability to disappear into a character. Val didn't become an icon because he was handsome or heavily marketed. He became famous because he dared to live each role as if it were a real fragment of his own life. It was at this pinnacle, when the world was looking up at him, that Val Kilmer began to feel the shadows gathering just behind his back. The brighter the studio lights became, the more fragile Val Kilmer's private world grew. In Hollywood, his exterior appeared unshakable, almost untouchable. But in his personal life, Val carried fractures no one else could see. His marriage to actress Joanne Whalley began like a beautiful movie scene. They met on the set of Willow and quickly became one of the most captivating couples of the late 80s. Their two children, Mercedes and Jack, lit up the gentlest part of Val, as if they were small candles warming a man known for his fierce intensity. But just when the family seemed whole, invisible pressures began pulling everything apart. Val loved acting so deeply that he didn't know how to stop. He lived inside every character, sometimes to the point of forgetting he was still meant to return home as a husband and father. Joanne once called it a love divided among too many people who don't actually exist. The characters Val carried with him every day. When the marriage fractured, Val fell into a deeper void than he expected. He plunged into work, hoping that psychologically demanding roles could fill the part of his life that was crumbling. But that same intensity made him, in the eyes of many directors, difficult, unpredictable, too serious. Behind all those rumors was a single truth. Val didn't know how to hide his pain. Even romantic relationships with Cher, Cindy Crawford, or Angelina Jolie couldn't anchor him to a peaceful life. Those loves arrived fast and left just as quickly, leaving Val with a familiar emptiness the same quiet void he had carried since the losses of his youth. Outwardly, he remained the talented, transformative star. Inside, he was a man terrified of losing the things he loved, yet unable to hold on to them. This hidden storm set Val on a path toward collapse, not through a single dramatic fall, but through a long, slow cracking that eroded him, piece by piece. Val Kilmer's collapse didn't arrive with an explosion. It came quietly, silently, slowly, and far more painfully than any tragic role he had ever portrayed. As he entered the 2000s, the once blazing image of Val Kilmer began to shake. Not because he lost his talent, not because Hollywood no longer had roles for him, but because Val was simply burning out under the weight of his own intensity. His extreme perfectionism made film crews wary. He demanded every scene to feel real, every emotion to reach the point of truth, to the extent that people said Val was no longer acting, but draining himself. A few projects failed, a few roles didn't make a mark, and slowly, the name Val Kilmer appeared less and less on major film posters. Then came the greatest blow of his life. Around 2014, Val discovered he had throat cancer, a diagnosis that forced him through aggressive treatment, radiation therapy, and ultimately a tracheotomy. The surgery saved his life, but stole his voice, the sharpest weapon he had as an actor. Once blessed with one of the most cinematic voices in Hollywood, Val now relied on a voice box to speak. A man who once shouted, laughed, and sang like Jim Morrison now had to relearn how to breathe, how to shape each word. Hollywood fell silent, and Val vanished. No red carpets, no new roles, no interviews, just a man who once stood in the brightest spotlight now facing himself alone in sterile hospital rooms. The most painful part wasn't losing fame. It was accepting the possibility that he might never return in the way the world once knew him. This collapse wasn't a single fall. It was a long journey of loss. The loss of health, the loss of his voice, the loss of his career path, the loss of the version of himself he once recognized. But in the next chapter, from that place that seemed most hopeless, a quiet, fragile new form of life began to emerge. Soft, but undeniably real. After the battle with cancer, Val Kilmer was no longer the man who once challenged every role, ready to dissolve himself into any character. He moved slower, spoke softer, and seemed to be learning how to live all over again. The scars on his neck, the strangled voice, the uneven breaths, all of it looked like the end for an actor. But for Val, they became the starting point of a different journey. A journey of understanding himself in ways he had never dared to, back when fame and ambition drowned out everything else. He began to record his life in the memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry. No hiding, no embellishing. Just the truth of a man once celebrated by the world, now forced to watch time take everything away. Those pages weren't written to impress anyone. They were written to heal, as if every story he put to paper softened the pain just a little bit more. Then came the documentary Val, not created by Hollywood, but built from the footage Val himself had filmed over more than 40 years. Scene by scene, breath by breath, the film revealed something undeniable. This wasn't the glamorous star of Top Gun or Batman. This was the real Val Kilmer, a man learning to accept his own fragility. And strangely, it was within that fragility that Val rediscovered his strength. He continued painting, writing poetry, creating art he never had the patience for in his younger years. He realized that life wasn't only about what had been taken from him, but also about what he could still create, even with a different voice and a different body. Then came the moment that made the entire world go silent. Val Kilmer's return in Top Gun: Maverick. Just a few minutes on screen, but those minutes became one of the most authentic cinematic moments Hollywood had ever seen. No acting, no special effects, just a human being with a throw. His scars, his hurt, and his courage, standing before the audience once again. And in Val's silence, one truth became unmistakably clear. The aftermath didn't break him. It taught him that healing doesn't always mean becoming who you were. Sometimes it means accepting the strength of the new version you've become. When an actor loses his voice, most people assume the story is over. But for Val Kilmer, that loss opened the door to another chapter, quieter, more honest, and perhaps more beautiful. He no longer chased big roles or felt the need to prove his place in Hollywood. Instead, Val chose a slower life in New Mexico, surrounded by dry winds and skies so clear they made the world feel endlessly open. He devoted himself to painting, to poetry, to small exhibitions where people could finally see Val the artist, not the star, not the icon, but a man discovering a new voice through colors and lines. His greatest moment of rebirth came in 2022, when Val returned in Top Gun: Maverick. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. Just one look, one gentle touch on Tom Cruise's shoulder, and a few strained lines of dialogue were enough to bring millions of viewers to tears. Because for the first time, they weren't watching Val Kilmer act. They were seeing the real Val Kilmer, a man standing before them with the courage of someone who had lost almost everything, yet still chose to step back into the light one more time. At this stage, Val no longer sought a triumphant comeback. He sought peace. He found new ways to tell stories through paintings, poetry, memoirs, and intimate gatherings where he didn't need a voice for people to listen to him. And it was in letting go of part of Hollywood that Val Kilmer finally saw himself more clearly. For him, rebirth wasn't about returning to who he used to be. It was about finding a new path on which to continue living, quietly but fully. When the noise of Hollywood no longer reached Val Kilmer the way it once did, he began to look back on his life with different eyes. No longer proud, no longer eager to prove anything, but with the gaze of a man who has endured enough pain to understand the value of silence. Val once admitted that there were years when he lived too intensely, disappearing so deeply into his characters that he lost pieces of himself. He regretted the moments he missed with his children, the relationships he didn't know how to keep, the days he forced himself to stand firm under the lights instead of accepting that he was simply a human being who needed love far more than applause. But within that regret, something else emerged. Gratitude. Gratitude that his body still allowed him to live. Gratitude that even without his voice, he could still tell stories in new ways. Gratitude that his wounds slowed him down just enough to realize life was far bigger than anything he had once chased. In the quiet afternoons when the wind sweeps across the New Mexico desert, Val sometimes sits and looks out at the distant mountains. He is no longer the man of explosive performances, no longer the cool, untouchable icon he once was. Now, he is simply Val Kilmer, a soul once pushed to its limits who has finally found a measure of peace. And in that stillness, he understands that reflection isn't about wishing to return to who he used to be, but about accepting the path he has walked, with all its glory and all its scars, and finding the grace to smile at himself. As this story comes to a close, one can almost picture Val Kilmer standing before a wide open window, the last light of the day casting a strangely warm glow across his face. No more heavy roles, no more intensity of Hollywood, only a man who has lived through everything: fame, heartbreak, illness, rebirth, and has finally found peace in the quiet of his own being. His performances, from the icy cool of Iceman to the tragic depth of Doc Holliday, continue to live in the memories of millions. Not because they were flawless, but because in every role, Val Kilmer left a piece of his real soul behind. And now, as this journey reaches its final page, I want to ask you something. Which moment of Val Kilmer touched you the most? A scene? A glance? Or simply the way he stood back up after the darkest years of his life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to continue journeying with us through more human, heartfelt stories about the extraordinary souls of cinema, please like and subscribe. It isn't just support. It's a way of helping stories like this continue to live on in all of us. See you on the next journey.